All right, I'm seeing kind of the bulk of connections, so let's jump right into it. Again, thank you so much for joining us for the CVRD's electoral area online update for June. My name is Colleen Dane. I'm with Sync Strategies. Me and my colleague Emily are here to support as facilitators for today's event. So today we're going to provide an update about some services and initiatives, that are underway in the electoral areas, and then address questions that you have that you've either brought to raise today or that you've sent in advance by email. This is our third time offering these online sessions, so if you've been here before, it's great to see you again. If this is your first time joining us, we're glad to have you, and thanks so much for giving us some of your time today. We're going to have a presentation to start, so I'm going to introduce those presenters now, and I'm hoping they'll give us a little wave. From the Regional District, we have Electoral Area C Director Edwin Grieve. We have Electoral Area A Director Daniel Arbour. Electoral Area B Director Arzina Hamir. And Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for the CVRD, James Warren. Great. We also have a number of staff on the call as well, so they are here to help us address any questions that are raised and provide additional information. So please don't be afraid to ask your questions during the Q&A period. We definitely have the people here to be able to provide as much information as we can. Before we dive into the presentation, I just want to point out a couple of tools on Zoom for those who aren't terribly familiar with this platform. If you hover over your screen, across the bottom is a black bar with a number of icons. Furthest to your left is a little microphone. It has a mute. We are going to keep people muted today just to reduce feedback and keep us all on track. But if you click that little upward arrow, that's where you can control your speakers too. So if you need to change any settings, that's the spot to do it. Beside that is a little video camera. Most people are keeping their videos off. You're welcome to have them on and off. Both are great, but you do have control of that with that button there. Further along, and probably most importantly, we have the chat icon. So that's a little dialogue bubble that says chat underneath it. This is how we're going to collect questions during the Q&A period. So if you open that up, you'll see a little white box pop up. You can type in your questions here. And then we will pull them from that and share them with the directors during the Q&A session in our second half of our hour. If you would prefer not to post your question for everyone to see, you're welcome to send a question directly to me by choosing my name from the drop-down menu below, and I will pull it and pose it to the directors anonymously. If you're having any technical questions, if you're not hearing me quite right or not seeing presentations correctly, please feel free to connect with Emily. She's under tech support, and she can try and help with some troubleshooting tips from a distance and hopefully make this experience run as smoothly as possible. Okay, I'm going to just pull up a quick slide to kind of walk through our last few reminders before we dive into content today. So I'm hoping you're seeing a screen with kind of 4 boxes that say webinar reminders. As we mentioned, we have the chat for collecting questions. Along with turning off your video, another way of kind of maintaining privacy in this online setting is to change the name as it's displayed on your Zoom image box. You can do that by either right-clicking on your area or clicking on the small button with 3 dots in the top right-hand corner and choosing rename. And you can change it to maybe initials or just a first name or whatever makes you feel comfortable to be a part of this setting today. We will be recording. We are not recording yet, but we wanted to make sure everybody would be aware that that is the plan today. The recording will be posted to the CVRD website. It focuses on the presenters and their responses, but it's important obviously for people to be aware of that. And I will make it clear when we start that recording. And so we will be getting going on that in just a few minutes. The format today is kind of half an hour presentation, half an hour of Q&A. So this is what the presentation is going to look like. We have the directors walking through a few regional updates as well as some area specific updates after an introduction from our deputy CAO momentarily. And then we'll open up to the Q&A session, and hopefully we can get through the questions that were emailed in advance and any questions that are shared in the meantime during our presentation today. So feel free to get up and wiggle and grab yourself a new coffee. We know an hour in front of a computer screen can be hard, but we appreciate very much your time and your attention today. So with that, we are going to start our recording, and I'm going to hand the presentation over. Okay.
All set.
Recording in progress.
Great. Okay, so with that, thank you, everyone. I'm now handing the presentation over to James Warren, Deputy CAO for the CVRD. Over to you, James.
Thanks, Colleen. Good afternoon, everyone. As Colleen said, my name is James Warren, and I am the Comox Valley Regional District's Deputy Chief Administrative Officer. And thank you to everybody for joining us for another community update. This is part of an engagement series that has been prioritized by the directors of the CVRD. The series aims to share regular updates throughout the year with residents. Before I dive in, we want to acknowledge that we are working on the traditional and unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, and we're thankful for their ongoing work with us. These online updates give us a chance to let you know about the services and initiatives the Regional District is working on in the electoral areas. Our last virtual update was in February, and as always, we look forward to these chances to share progress and updates about CVRD work. While it sounds like there may be a chance of in-person updates later this year, for now, we enjoy the opportunity to talk with you virtually. Now in mid-June, there is plenty to share. We have some significant project updates, and we have some important information about how you can get involved in the various initiatives in your area. Your feedback and questions in these sessions are helpful in our planning and for your directors' considerations. With that, I'll hand it over to the directors for their individual updates now, but want to add that we welcome your participation. We have several staff on the call today who can help with answering any questions you may have, so please ask away. And once again, thank you for sharing your lunch hour with us. So Director Grieve, I'm happy to pass the mic over to you.
Thank you very much, James, and thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy lunch hour to sit in front of a computer screen on a beautiful day. At least it's turning out pretty good. My name is Edwin Grieve, and I am the Electoral Area Director for Area C in the Comox Valley. I wanted to talk to you briefly about the AAP process, which is the alternate approval process. Some of you may be familiar with this process, it's sometimes called a counter petition. But for those who aren't, an AAP is a way of testing the waters when seeking electoral support when we need to either go to borrowing or create a service. AAPs are much less expensive to administer than referendums. Referendums cost upwards to $60,000, whereas an AAP is only $6,000. And it still offers an opportunity for those who are not in favor to show their opposition. How it works is quite simple. If you support the services being proposed, you don't need to do anything. If you're opposed, you can submit an electoral response form, and these can be downloaded at www.comoxvalley.rd.ca/AAP. If 10% of eligible electors register their opposition to an AAP, the board may choose either to proceed or not proceed, or they could proceed to a referendum before it becomes an opportunity for everyone to weigh in. The only exception of this year's combined AAPs is the conveyance project for the sewer commission. It's approved through a liquid waste management plan, which can authorize expenditure on its own. Traditionally, an AAP would be held on a project or service when it was ready. Sometimes this means that there could be multiple AAPs during the year. Instead, the CVRD has implemented a streamlined approach this year by holding one unified AAP in 2021 to capture as many initiatives as possible. The goal is to make it easier for the public to keep track of the proposals and the when and how to participate. This unified AAP is underway now. Initiatives included in this AAP period cover a wide range of interests, including Community Facility Support Service Establishment, which is going to establish a service that would create operational funding for community halls in the electoral area. Up to now, they've been funded strictly on a case-by-case basis through community grants. This would give them the security to move forward with 5-year plans. The other one, of course, that gets a lot of attention is the rural roadside garbage recycling and yard waste collection. But Daniel Arbor has the great distinction of being able to speak to this later on in the meeting. Also included in this AAP is the Saratoga Beach Mosquito Management Service for Area C in Saratoga Miracle Beach. This would allow us to address concerns about a mosquito infestation in that area. For more information on this initiative, you can visit the webpage being displayed at the end of this session. We encourage you to learn more about AAP and the proposed services included in it by visiting our website or calling us here at the CVRD office. Have a couple area updates here just for Area C residents that I want to touch on. We know that there's always been interest in progress on fire services. 2 of it in our area have been impacted by COVID related timing delays. One is the Merville Fire Hall service. Work is now underway to get the Merville Fire Hall ready for construction. The tender has been issued for construction and is currently open, but will be closing very shortly. The project team will review the bids received with a view to award a construction contract probably later in June or July of 2021. The Mount Washington Fire Service is a little more bogged down, but a conceptual plan for the new fire hall in Mount Washington is completed, and the updated costs are in progress. Anybody who's building anything today and knows the price of a 2x4 realizes that construction costs have gone up over 28% in the last 16 weeks or months, sorry. Timing for this public input will be confirmed once all the required information is in. Once the timeline is in place, the CVRD will be able to update the community, the Mount Washington community, on the proposed timing for the future construction of that fire hall. Now, as we approach summer, we also want to remind people in all electoral areas about the Fire Smart program. This program provides techniques that you can use to reduce the risks of losing buildings and properties in the event of a wildfire and urban interface. These steps can be taken are very easily and are not very expensive. The CVRD, Comox First Nation, and the 4 CVRD fire departments are working together to raise awareness of this program and to encourage neighborhoods to get involved in it. You can learn more again by visiting comoxvalleyrd.ca/firesmart. So I think that's a really important thing. It's a community event, mostly something that is localized in a certain neighborhood. We already have the residents on Macaulay Road, Martin Park Drive, are certified Fire Smart communities. So we do encourage other communities to maybe take this initiative. Now, along with that, it's time to turn it over to Director Arbor. So, Director Arbor, take it away.
Thank you, Director Grieve, and it's a pleasure to be here. I think I gave the staff a little bit of a scare there because I was with Mosaic behind Union Bay at Langley Lake this morning, and I almost missed this meeting. So I'm glad to be here in time. There are services proposed that will be interest to you. As Director Grieve said, I have the great pleasure to talk about the rural roadside garbage and recycling collection service. I know it's been the object of much community discussion over the last couple of months, and we're definitely in the time window where the electorate gets to have their say on it. So I just want to give or reiterate the background for those who may not have heard about it yet, but the roadside garbage and recycling collection service is being proposed for the rural areas for a number of reasons. One of which, the environment, it's a priority for all of us to ensure that our waste is properly managed in a responsible manner. A collection program where it exists, we know ensures that waste is properly diverted and we get better recycling outcomes. It would help us preserve landfill space, all those good things on the environmental front. The regional service can also obviously improve convenience to homeowners, not having to drive to the landfill as much. And in some cases, in fact, many cases, reduce the cost for those who rely on the private haulers by having a universal system. A year ago, we fielded a lot of question about why it went to AAP rather than referendum, but it's a couple of reasons. One is AAP is cheaper for sure, and second is a year ago we had a survey and close to 3,000 people answered that survey, and there was upwards of 78% support for the proposal. So it's on that basis. AAP often used for proposals that we don't expect as much concern from the electorate. Now we know there's been some with this one, and there's been what I'd say a little bit of a misinformation too, but just make sure to reach out to us if you want the accurate information. At the time, based on the result of the survey, some of the things that we took away was to have garbage collection every 2 weeks with 2 cans included in each pickup, the opportunity for up to 2 additional cans through an extra tag program, recycling collection every 2 weeks also with unlimited volumes, seasonal pickup of yard waste once per month from March to November. And the service would be provided through a privately owned waste hauling company, so contracted out by the CVRD. And the directors did talk about the value of social procurement to recognize the value of businesses that fit well with the values and expectation of residents. The estimated cost for the service would be about $20 a month to a household. We covered a lot of information in 3 webinars from May. Our staff was there to answer questions. We have video of those sessions and a web page, obviously, where people can go see it. The main funnel through all this is through Comox Valley RD/AAP. And in terms of for people who are opposed to the service, you have until July 5th to submit your form to the regional district. We know there's been a change in the rural areas, by the way, with the closure of the Courtney Country Market Recycling Depot and the scheduled closure of the Canex. And those were really based on continued illegal dumping, high levels of contaminations, which often results in the bins being landfill. Like I live on Hornby, and our depot is staff. It's quite expensive to have staff depot, and we found that the unstaffed depots, pretty much a lot of it ended up in the garbage. So it didn't prove to be a very successful program. And lastly, the establishment of a roadside collection service will help ensure that recyclables go through the Recycle BC network. There's also perceptions in Canada that that a lot of recycling and end up in the garbage anyways, but there's been CBC and others have covered the BC situation, and we really do get good recycling outcomes. So if people want information on that, we can definitely direct you to that information. Now I'll turn my attention to Area A, just on a couple of updates. We have so many projects in Area A. It's taking a big chunk of time of staff and elected officials as well. So I won't go through them all, but highlight a couple of meaningful ones that are happening this month. The Union Bay Improvement District conversion has been a very extensive and resource-intensive process in terms of the collaboration between UBID and CVRD staff following the referendum of November to transfer the management of the 3 services, water, fire, and street lighting, to the regional district. We're in the final stretch, and July 1st is the official transfer date. The UBID offices will formally close on June 25th, so that's coming up pretty quick as well. And yeah, we've been working together on ensuring a smooth transition. Staff, I understand, of UBID were at the regional district office yesterday, getting introduced to the office. Most of the staff is moving on. All those that wanted to, I believe, are coming on. While much of the change will not be noticeable to residents. There are some changes that are noted. So obviously you will receive your bill from the CVRD for the water with payments going to the CVRD. An online open house was held on May 18th, if you missed it, where we went through some of those details, but we have the video at comoxvalleyRD.ca/ubid. We're also distributing a newsletter. I believe it's in print and heading your way with additional details about what to expect. Thank you to everyone who's helped make this a smooth transition. I think my report from staff is that things have gone pretty well. And we have a working group, an advisory group as well that is continuing on, consisting of UBID trustees and myself and staff and the ministry. And in terms of after conversion, we will have 3 months where that group will stay there to really go over any issues that arise if there's problems in the transit once it passes to the regional district. And I'd like to say that the CVRD board last night voted unanimously for the first and second reading of all the bylaws that are before us for the CVRD to be able to move forward with those services. Lastly, I think everyone knows that it's been through COVID, we've definitely appreciated the value of our parks as people look to activities. As chair of the commission, the Recreation Commission, we've had to close our main facilities for creation. So we did see an uptick in park usage, and we continue, slowly and steady to work on our park strategy for all the rural areas to 2030. And recently, last month, I was really pleased to open the Kirks Road Stairs on Denman Island as part of the Cross Denman Trail. And yeah, we're always happy to keep improving those amenities in all the different communities to make sure that people have good places to go for walks and just enjoy nature. And on that note, I will pass it on to Director Amir, and I look forward to any questions that people may have.
Thanks, Director Arbor. And thanks again to everybody who's tuning in on this fine day. My name is Arzina Hamir. I'm the Area B Director on the Comox Valley Regional District. So one of the updates I want to give to you is regarding our community grants. So I know I can speak for the directors on this. This is one of the few services that we provide that I think that as rural directors, we really take a lot of pleasure in providing funding for our communities. We know a lot of the nonprofit groups in our communities are doing so much great work, especially in the time of COVID. And this is one way for us as directors and the community who provides the funding to give back to all of those groups that are doing such great work in our community. So I just want to highlight a few of the groups that got funding through the community grants process. Lush Valley Food Action Society received $15,000 for 2021 and 2022 to help facilitate the Comox Valley Food Policy Council. And for those of you who haven't heard of that policy council, that is actually the policy council that's responsible for the recent changes in bylaws in the different municipalities and in the RD to encourage more chickens and bees in both the municipal and rural areas. The Comox Valley Land Trust received $10,000 to build on local climate resiliency by protecting, restoring, and connecting sensitive ecosystems in the watershed. And the Youth Ecological Restoration Program received $5,300 to help train at-risk youth in ecological inventory techniques within the CVRD. I had the great pleasure of having them walk me through goose spit as they helped show me what all of the different species that were of interest in the goose spit area. So I know each of us are really excited to make our contributions to our own areas, and we also have shared projects that we fund as rural directors that impact a much wider area. You can find more about these community grants on the website at comoxvalleyrd.ca/community grants, along with information on how to apply for those grants if you're interested. Another interesting regional update for the spring is our Comox Valley Agricultural Plan. So as a farmer myself, I'm very, very excited about this. It was approved in May, so we couldn't get it out in the newsletter, but we have not had an update to our agricultural plan in the Comox Valley since about 2002. So we're coming up on 20 years. The agricultural plan has a goal of developing socially, culturally, and economically sustainable farming for the region. It will allow an agricultural coordinator to begin assessing the valley and engaging with the agricultural sector to evaluate the expectations and opportunities for updating the plan. This year, the focus will be on pre-planning work, like applying for grant funding to support the work, and in the preliminary outreach into the sector. If approved, the Comox Valley Agricultural Plan will be updated as a final point for 2022 and 2023. So I know it's something that the farming sector has really been asking for a long time, and I'm really happy that we've been able to budget that for this year. For electoral area B specifically, I want to touch base on the ongoing sewer planning process through the sewer liquid waste management plan. So this is another item that's on the unified AAP that was discussed earlier. As you may know, the proposed route does include work within Area B, including tunneling of a portion of the route through Lazo Hill and under properties in the area. We know it's a real worry for some of those in the area, and our project team is working with residents to keep them informed at every step of the way. In late May, a third series of online meetings for people living in the neighborhood was hosted to address questions and share updates. We've heard the concerns from many in the community, particularly around the impact of what a leak would have on their drinking water. So staff provided information about the protection against leaks, but I'm glad to say there will also be a policy developed in advance about how a leak would be managed, and in this very small chance of a leak occurring. Because the AAP is for borrowing and Area B residents do not pay into the Comox Valley Sewer Service, we don't unfortunately get to participate in the AAP for this, but it is something that I'm continuing to monitor because it does impact residents in Area B. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Colleen.
Great. Thank you, Director Hamir, and great, Director Arbour. That was a really good update with lots of information. I'm going to share a screen again here just for a moment because it has the websites that were referenced through your presentation. So I'm going to keep that slide up for a few moments so that anybody who is looking for additional information about the topics that you covered, that they can find out anything more there. And I'll be sharing the director's contact information too a little bit closer to the end of our hour. So I'm just going to remind people that we are happy to address any questions that you have. If you want to open up the chat window in the bottom of kind of your Zoom toolbar, you can type in questions there. I see a nice comment about the agricultural plan, but no questions just yet. So I will leave that for you guys to add to if you would like. But we do have a few that were emailed in advance. So I'll start with those while we're waiting to see if there are any other thoughts raised. So the first one I'm going to send to you, Director Arbour. It is actually, we had two speaking to this, people looking for whether or not there was an update on what was called the South Sewer Project, or the extension of sewer service down to Union Bay. Do we have any updated information for people about that?
Yeah, thanks. And maybe we'll see if staff wants to complement, but I generally we're kind of in waiting mode around the South Sewer project, and I am getting a little bit not frustrated, but it's just the waiting is getting long in the tooth, so to speak. So for those who don't know, about a year ago, we gained a historical opportunity to plug into the municipal system, and that opportunity will remain. I believe we've secured that with the support of the Switch Commission and the CVRD Board of Directors. The big question is just the cost of infrastructure, and we know in the prior referendum that it had been turned down. The cost was pretty high to homeowners, so we did apply to a very substantial grant, provincial and federal grant. And initially, we had told we would hear by December, 2020 or something. But it is now June, and we still don't have a yes or a no. That will be quite consequential as to whether we are able to proceed in the short term or whether we will have to look at the longer term. Very significant issue, long-standing issue for the communities of Royston and Union Bay. Some of you may know we also work with the developer on Union Bay Estates that have sewage requirements and commitments to collaborate on extending sewer to Royston and Union Bay. So not an easy scene, but ultimately we partnered with Comox First Nation and Union Bay Estates in the grant, and we're hopeful that the province will recognize the value of a contribution to that project, which also will have direct benefits actually to other things. Like I hear from the shellfish growers all the time, and people who have a concern around the environment around Bain Sound are really hopeful that senior government is going to come to the table to help us out. So unless staff wants to add anything, it's a frustrating non-status for me. I'm just waiting to hear if we get this grant or not.
Okay, just because while we stay on wastewater management in the Union Bay area, we also had a question emailed in about a sewage application to release treated effluent into Hart and Washer Creek from Union Bay Estates. Do you have any information about that application and how or whether it fits with the conditions of the development agreement with Kensington in the area?
Thanks. I'll start the answer, and maybe Mark will jump in on that one. And essentially, obviously, the person who has a question is educated around those issues. There's a master development agreement with the developer that commits the developer to, first of all, have community sewage for the development. So that's requirement of the MDA. And second, that community sewage be expandable to the communities of Union Bay and Royston. So we are aware they have an application to the province for sort of the first phases of development, but I think we haven't crossed all the I's and the T's around what that means for expandability and the future of sewage service, including if we got the grant and we're able to proceed. So I'll let Mark kind of add a little bit more detail or color to that, if he will.
Yeah, thank you, Director Arbour. I think the key point here is that we do understand the obligations and requirements in the MDA, and we're trying to ensure that those are met by the developer. But we understand that this is a difficult area to service with sewer, and so for this particular option that the developer has come up with and is working with MOE on, we're exploring that option with him, and we're seeing if there is a fit within the MDA and within the long-term, the long-term objective of providing sustainable and affordable wastewater solution to the area.
Great.
Thanks. And just to clarify, it's in the case of the application, it's a provincial decision, so we're also waiting to see how that goes.
Great. Okay, thank you for those. That was a couple email questions, and I see a couple questions have come into the chat, so I'm going to jump to those before going back to a few more emailed ones. So the first one that popped in is asking about what the plans will be for the recycling bins that are at the old fire hall at Oyster River, and if the rural roadside pickup does go through, would that mean that those recycling bins are to be removed? That be Director Grieve, do you have information on that?
I'll defer to Mark. My understanding is that those weren't part of the plan to remove, at least not immediately. And we were thinking of trying to apply to Recycle BC to get a proper recycling depot. But I'm not sure where we're at on that, so maybe Mark can fill us in.
Yeah, thanks, Director Grieve. Yeah, so you're right. There is no plan to remove the depot at Oyster River. So we're going to maintain that one. We're going to continue it the way it is. We are going to discuss with the Solid Waste Board whether they're interested in making some improvements at that depot. So maybe some increased staff time there, some more monitoring of the material to avoid some of the issues that we have with these unstaffed depots. And then long term, like Director Grieve mentioned, we also plan to continue to work with Recycle BC to see if that depot can be converted into a full Recycle BC depot. But for now, that depot is pretty strategic. It's pretty well located. And even though it continues to be a non-Recycle BC depot, we do think that it should stay the way it is, at least for now. So it won't be removed in the immediate future.
Great, thank you. And then the next question is for Director Hamir from a representative from the CV Conservation Partnership. Would you be able to provide any update on the transition of a community grant program to a multi-year platform?
Yeah, I'll provide just a bit of background, but then I might defer possibly to James to see where we're at. So, we were talking about the rural grants earlier and how important they are to our community groups. And what the directors were seeing were there were a number of organizations, especially the environmental ones, stream keepers, the youth environmental groups, that we were funding on an annual basis. And we felt that it was really important to give them a bit more stability and to not have to reapply every single year. And a multi-year approval would enable them to then leverage some of those dollars for other funding that they can get as nonprofits. Now, we pre-approved a list, I believe the last time at electoral areas, and I'm just going to double check with staff or maybe with Doug if you can remind me where we're at on the approval and the budget for those.
Thanks, Director Hamir. And yeah, Doug DeMarzo is our General Manager of Community Services. And Doug, you probably got the detail for that question.
Yeah, I think at this stage, we're considering two options. We're considering looking at it this fall and then perhaps a short-term agreement, but more than likely we'll be looking at preparing agreements with those and then probably implementing for the 2023 budget cycle to start those agreements. So it might be some conversations perhaps starting next year and then moving for the commencement of those approvals for the 2023 budget cycle.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Okay, I'm going to hop back over to a couple of the emailed questions. Director Grieve, these ones are going to be coming to you. We had a few questions about the proposed changes at the Saratoga Speedway area and then from residents along Macaulay Road. So I guess the first question, probably a logical place to start is, will there be an opportunity for the community to review the application for changes at the Saratoga Speedway?
Well, it's the Saratoga Speedway is making an application to rezone part of the land to accommodate a campsite. For any rezoning process, of course, there's a lot of procedural opportunity for the community to weigh in. We just sent out our first referrals earlier this month to all the affected bodies, like you talk about the Ministry of Highways, Island Health, and Comox First Nation for comment, as well as our Area C Advisory Panel, Planning Commission. So there's a lot of opportunity, especially when it gets to the point of public hearing, because after second reading of this, it would go to public hearing, and that would give everybody an opportunity to weigh in on the official record. So it's just now starting off, really just kicked off. We've got I think a total of 90 days for the referrals to come back, a maximum of 90 days. So we'll see how that goes. And then it will come back again to the Electoral Area Services Committee From there, it would possibly go to second reading, and at that point, there's a full-fledged public hearing process, which will be well advertised.
Just following up on that topic, there was a specific question about whether or not a traffic mitigation plan or review was done as part of this proposed work, and whether or not that's available to the public for review.
As I said, it just went out for referrals, so the Ministry of Transport may have some comments on that. So I'm sure it'll be form part of the discussion as this process moves through.
Okay. And then kind of leading into a general question, I guess, about Macaulay Road and interest in additional access in and out of that area. So one writer asking whether or not this proposed project could provide the impetus for an additional access or connectivity for Macaulay Road.
Well, as most people realize, the roads in the electoral areas are strictly the domain of the provincial government. So we cannot compel the government to build any roads on their own. This issue has been brought forward quite often over the last 10, 13 years. And we have had meetings with the MLA, with the ministry, and basically the only way that we can that we could see the province going forward with a new road access would be through a subdivision process, and that would be probably would fall on the developer to build the road themselves. But right now there is no appetite from the province to review this. Although we can always be hopeful, we can always keep bringing it forward.
Right. Okay, and then another series of questions that came in from email, Director Arbour, that I'm going to pass to you on the topic of the gravel pit or gravel extraction application in Union Bay. So the question is, what criteria is used to approve that specific area for use, for this kind of use?
Thanks. That's a great question, and actually, you know, I find always interesting things in our zoning bylaws around different lots, because the same question arose around the industrial marine just down the road in Union Bay. And so I think there is an element that's part of the just historical zoning, but also as part of the MDA. And then we have a steep slope development permit. Maybe I will pass it. I wonder if Alana Mohali could provide a little bit of history on this to the community so they understand how we get to today and where the regional district can and cannot get involved, so to speak.
Sure. Thank you very much, Director Arbour. As Director Arbour just mentioned, there is quite a history, and I know a number of the folks on the call have been with this file since the very beginning and have attended all of the public information meetings. So we do have a really fulsome body of wealth within the community. But on the question of any kind of resource extraction, folks will know or likely know that the jurisdiction to extract rests with the province, similar to our roads issue that we have in the rural areas. And where local government can have an influence or play a role is what happens with that, say, gravel in this case, or sand, is what happens on the surface of the land. So in the case of the Union Bay Estates development, as Director Arbour has noted, there's both zoning and a master development agreement, which speak to the gravel, what happens with the gravel on the surface. So in the both in the zoning on the Union Bay Estates land and in the master development agreement, provision is made for temporary use of gravel. And the reason that this is an important distinction is because the intent is to provide the developer with access to that gravel for use in the development. So unlike in other rural, unlike in rural zones that we have in our zoning bylaw, where gravel extraction, processing, and crushing is a permitted rural use, this is really about serving and meeting the needs of the development itself. And the master development agreement and zoning reflect that. We do have some provisions around generally that apply to both these temporary gravel uses as well as the permanent ones around setbacks and buffering, because we recognize that this is really where the rubber hits the road for neighborhoods. These can be very impactful uses, and it's our effort using the zoning tool, which I have to say is relatively limited in its ability to mitigate impact. Those are sort of our best pieces. So setting minimum setbacks and setting requirements for screening. So that's why we're here. There might be some further questions on this, Colleen, but folks will know that an application has been made by this owner to the province to extract that gravel, and that some of that work is underway. Director Arbour noted that we do have a development permit area. We have several development permit areas, and the one that seems to be caught up in this particular application is our steep slopes development permit. Now, essentially, what this permit is all about is making sure that development is protected from hazard, in this case, steep slope. So within an area of 7.5 meters from the top of the stable bank of a slope to its toe, so just think top and bottom of that slope, 7.5 meters outward. That's the area where our permit applies. So if someone is going to alter land or remove trees within that area, then we can levy this permit requirement. And that's what's happened here. Now, folks on the call know that that development, that extraction happened before the province issued the permit and before the CVRD had a chance, with a development permit application being made. So the owner is in the process of rectifying that now, working with the province on the permit. Some of you will have provided comments to the province regarding your input on either the terms of the permit or the use itself. And then we are waiting to receive our development permit application, and we are working very closely with the owner's agent on that. And they know that that's an imperative for the community, that this needs to get in. We've got a requirement in place, and our understanding is that the owner intends to fulfill that requirement.
Great. Elena, you kind of touched on it, but just because it was kind of a specific question that came in, you've talked about how the owner is kind of rectifying the fact that that work started before. There's a question specifically about whether or not there are any consequences to that work having started before those permits and applications were completed.
Yeah, so just to be, really clear and not to be evasive, like my intent is to be clear about what our jurisdiction is. We can invoke consequences when one of our permit requirements is breached. Generally, we have a policy here at the CVRD that our interest is to work with property owners to gain compliance. That's what we want, right? It's not a punitive or enforcement lens right out the door. And so in this case, what we have is an owner who is taking the steps right now to bring the land use alteration into compliance with our permit requirement. So we're not at the point now where we're needing to talk to the board about what enforcement could look like, but certainly that is an avenue that's available to the board if and when we have an owner who's not interested in compliance, but that does not appear to be the case here. And I wouldn't comment just because of jurisdiction on what the province might be working on with that owner respective to their permit.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think that covered kind of a group of questions on that topic. So I am going to go back to the chat, and there's a question about kind of the ongoing work for protection of watersheds, and obviously the importance that plays for everybody in the CVRD. The question is asking whether or not there's interest by the CVRD to lobby other related jurisdictions to seek a moratorium on mining on the eastern slopes of the Beaufort Range, specifically to protect water resources. Director Hamir, do you want to start with that? Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks very much for the question. So first of all, I have to say, I don't think mining has actually been brought up as an issue to the Regional District Board. And I highly recommend, if there are groups that are interested in helping to educate the directors, a delegation to the CVRD would be much appreciated, and I think very much welcomed. Having said that, watershed protection is something that is very near and dear to many of our hearts. And we've seen that with the work that we as a board have supported around looking at our Comox Lake, our drinking watershed, as a natural asset. We have helped to fund a municipal natural asset project around Comox Lake. And it's really looking at prioritizing and accounting for all of the benefits that our watershed provides us, almost like it's a hard asset. So that work has been going on very much so. We also recently just completed our Solom River agricultural watershed demand modeling, looking at how much the Solom River supports the farming sector in the regional district. And so, you know, those two are just a couple of examples of how we're trying to recognize and really investigate how our watershed supports both the natural assets, but also economic activity in the region. So I would say we did recently write a letter to the Premier and to the relative ministers, the Ministry of Forestry particularly, around old growth logging. Both Director Arbour and I have been investigating that issue very much so here on Vancouver Island. And so the board as a whole agreed to write that letter and lobby that letter because we were watching what's happening and it's of concern. So around mining, something like that should be brought to the board. And I recommend bringing it to the whole board, not just the electoral areas, so that we can be educated on what the issue is and find out some more information.
Okay. Director Arbour, Director Grieve, do you guys have anything you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, I can add a little bit. I think I'm glad to see the question asked because it's actually not often in our radar these days around the mining potential. We are not quite a communist country, so we still have a lot of private stakeholders that can have massive impacts on the landscape. And so obviously I remember 10 years ago in Area A when Raven Coal Mine was proposing to restart a big a big endeavor, and I think this question serves as a good reminder to I've put my mind in the last month to forestry issue, as Director Amira said, but the reality is that yeah, we can lobby the government, but the licenses for mining are actually owned by private companies. It'd be great if local government could convince, basically the elimination of those rights because of the impact that it could have. But we can't. And the other is, could we own those rights and try to gain them while we have very limited financial capacity? But I will say that the initial platform for the current Minister of Municipal Affairs in Tofino was for local government to have. She brought a motion to UBCM in 2014 calling for the province to grant more control and powers to local government when it comes to mining projects. So based on that question, I commit I will see her in not too long, and I will remind her of that motion she had made, and perhaps now that she's Minister of Municipal Affairs, to see if she can do some internal lobbying at Cabinet on our behalf, reminding her that projects like the Raven coal mine could be reactivated at any time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. So we have kind of 3 questions remaining in the chat. They're all kind of follow-up questions on topics that we've touched on, but seeing kind of no new issues coming up, I'm going to go back and cover them. We're down to our last 5 minutes, so that'll bring us pretty close to the wrap up. So I'm just going to kind of do the final call for questions. If anybody has any last pieces they want to add, now is a great time to drop them into the chat. And then I'm going to go back. I'm sorry, I missed this one originally, but it's back to the Union Bay sewage question. Mark, it's following up on your comment actually specifically. So the question is whether or not the CVRD would be willing to own a system that ultimately releases treated effluent into, CVRD willing to own a system which dumps treated effluent as set out in the MDA?
Yeah, okay, thank you. So I think, it's really too early to properly answer that question. Like we are in discussions with the developer, Union Bay Estates, about how their wastewater permit application will meet the MDA requirements. If there is a fit between their application and what they're intending to construct as a sewer solution, if there's a fit between that and the MDA requirements and what we envision as a long-term solution, then we would put our minds to their proposed discharge and how it works and whether it's something that we could take over. So it's really too soon to answer the question directly, but in the long run, we'll see. Thanks.
Great. Okay, and then the other follow-up question was back to the gravel sand pit discussion. So Director Arbour and Alana, I think there's just seeking some clarification about whether or not the CVRD has a say in the location of that gravel and sand extraction work.
Yeah, over to Alana, and maybe Alana, you can speak a little bit about the provincial referral process and how it applies here, and also in regards to whether a resident should anticipate that other locations may be developed for gravel in the Union Bay area.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you, Director Arby, and thank you for the question. I would just, before I start, I'd like to draw the distinction between resource extraction and resource processing. So resource extraction, be it gravel, sand, minerals, as you likely know, local government cannot say no, totally the purview of the province. When it comes to what happens again on the surface of the land with the use of that material that's extracted, that's where local government can play a role. So for example, processing, crushing, sale, those are sort of the big ones that we see in our rural area. And that is where we can use zoning to establish where that can occur, and we can set some conditions around what needs to happen if it's going to occur. So I'll give you an example of one of our rural zones and the rural 20 zone. These are large lots. Provision is made for folks to extract gravel and then to crush it, screen it, sell it from those rural properties. Now, on a property like the Union Bay Estates, as I mentioned earlier, the intent here is really just to provide that availability of that resource for the development itself. So the zoning on this property does not include the ability to sell. I know we've had some questions from the community about whether we could see a commercial site established here, and if the owner, current or future, wanted to pursue that, a separate approval would be needed from the local government, because that is the authority of a regional district board to regulate the sale of those products. So that's probably what I would say in a nutshell about our authority. The provincial referral process that Director Arbour mentions, as you know, the permit application has been made to the Ministry of Mines and is out for comment. So if you haven't had a chance and you're really keen to provide that feedback to the province, then please do that. I think that period closes on Friday of this week. We also get a referral, and that's where we're asked to provide comments. So in the case of Union Bay Estates, we look to our policy framework, because that's really, it's not about our personal opinions, it's about the policy framework that the board has set and then the community has set. So in this case, we're providing comment relative to our official community plan, the zoning of the lands, and the master development agreement that's registered over the lands.
Great.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I appreciate the extra clarification. Okay, and then the last follow-up question was back to Macaulay Road. So Director Grieve, the commenter is acknowledging, is kind of highlighting the fact that this has been, the kind of double access has been a concern. The regional district has acknowledged that as a challenge. It indicates the ALC has granted interest to the regional district in the area. So the question is, why can't there be a kind of a real practical emergency access route created for the area, or some kind of practical next step, a feasibility study to be able to move this process forward?
Thank you very much for that question. Well, of course, they do have that one emergency access about halfway up Macaulay. But the fire department's been working as well with an local property owner at the end of Macaulay to the Cranberry Farm. And there is an emergency egress route through there should there be the need arise. As far as I say, as far as building a road, that's way beyond our pay scale here at the regional district. That was something that the ministry would have to come up with. And right now there is. And I would remind historically that when the Highway 19 was proposed, there was a lot of opposition to connecting it through to Macaulay Road at the time. Of course, times change. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our questions and really to the end of our time. I'm going to just put up a quick slide that has the contact information for our three directors and where you'll be able to find this recording once we're finished. It's also, the Connect CVRD page is also a great place to be able to post questions and keep track of regular updates on behalf of the directors. So please feel free to reach out there and connect with us and follow along in between these online updates. But with that, I'm going to just say, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for joining us today and for participating, sharing your questions and hearing these updates. And we hope to see you again next time. So until then, have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everybody.